Xi Jinping's slogan, Eastern Ascendance, Western Decline, has resurfaced. Party-controlled media outlets have published high-profile articles to reignite fervor around this slogan. However, with the changing global landscape, the slogan falls flat. China's economic growth has slowed, the real estate market is sluggish, and unemployment rates remain high, leaving ordinary citizens grappling with challenges. In contrast, Western countries, despite facing setbacks such as the pandemic and the Russia-Ukraine conflict, are gradually recovering economically and technologically. So, is it Eastern ascendance, Western decline, or rather Western strength, Eastern weakness? Enter the Guangming Daily, one of China's three major party-controlled media outlets. On February 25th, it published a peculiar article with the headline, "Skeptics Can't Stop the Momentum of Eastern Ascendance, Western Decline." Yet the content ironically suggests that China still faces many economic challenges. The article begins by stating that although the proportion of the US GDP to the global economy increased in 2023 while China's share decreased, one cannot conclude from this that China's development prospects are dim or that the global economic landscape has ceased its evolution towards Eastern ascendance, Western decline. Such logic is truly baffling. Isn't GDP used to measure a country's economic strength? With the US GDP proportion increasing globally and China's decreasing, isn't it a clear sign of China's dimming development prospects? How does this fit with Eastern ascendance, Western decline? It seems the opposite is true. Furthermore, the article contends that the US's growing GDP is due to inflation and the appreciation of the dollar, rather than the actual economic growth. While inflation and dollar appreciation indeed contribute to the increase in the US GDP proportion, they are not the sole factors. The US economy still achieved real growth in 2023. Primarily due to its robust technological innovation capabilities and domestic consumer market. The article selectively mentions the normal growth rate of the US GDP without addressing the real growth rate, displaying a biased use of data. The author goes on to claim that the share of global GDP represented by advanced economies, led by the US, will temporarily rise and then fall, while that of developing economies, led by China, will temporarily fall and then rise. Such statements are truly astounding. The dynamics between advanced and developing economies cannot be explained in a single sentence. Various factors such as economic, political, cultural, and social aspects play significant roles. By casually predicting the major trends of the next few decades, the author seems overly presumptuous. Although the US may currently face some challenges, its underlying strengths remain intact. On the contrary, China's economy, despite its previous successes, now faces numerous and severe problems. If these issues are not promptly addressed, they will only lead to increasing disillusionment among the populace. Given these economic realities, the idea of Eastern ascendance, Western decline appears increasingly implausible. The author's assertion that China is a leader among developing nations raises eyebrows. Has the author considered countries like India, Vietnam, Indonesia, or the Philippines? These nations are experiencing rapid development and certainly do not see themselves as subordinate to China. On what basis does China claim superiority? With the world being vast and full of talent, China should focus on developing its own nation rather than constantly aspiring to be the hegemon. As for the slogan, Eastern Ascendance, Western Decline, it was Xi Jinping in 2021 who fervently believed that China was the future of the world, while Western nations were on the decline. In his eyes, Western capitalist countries were greedy and decadent, barely hanging on after being battered by the pandemic, unable to halt China's rise. He even asserted that China could now stand eye to eye with the world. However, reality has proven otherwise. China's economy not only failed to ascend, but instead plummeted into an abyss. Xi Jinping's slogan has become a laughingstock, with even China's own international strategic scholars skeptical of it. Before the CCP's 20th National Congress, Fu Mengzi and Wang Wen, deputy directors of the China Institutes of Contemporary International Relations, both believed that the rise in the East and the decline in the West were slowing down. Professor Yan Shutong from Tsinghua University predicted that the gap between China and the US would widen over the next decade. Professor Zhu Feng from Nanjing University warned that there are at least 4 major areas where differences exist between China and the US: high-tech manufacturing, currency and finance, the strength of economic circles, and international voice. The public satire suggests that Eastern ascendance, Western decline means China's economy rises from the East and falls in the West. Some even joke that the slogan actually means China's dream rises from the East only to shatter in the West. There are also suggestions that if China ascends, meaning if the people rise up, Xi Jinping will be ousted. It was against this backdrop that the Guangming Daily's article was published. When Professor Sun Guoxiang of Taiwan's Nanhua University read this article, he burst into laughter, stating that party media articles are nothing but deception. They cherry-pick data that benefits China and cast the U.S. in a bad light, engaging in outright manipulation. Take inflation, for example. Party media constantly use it to belittle the U.S., but inflation often signifies economic development, while deflation signifies economic decline. Looking at China, where internal competition is severe, many commodity prices continue to drop due to unsustainable levels of competition. Professor Sun believes that nearly all economic indicators in China are problematic now, and this article is a typical self-congratulatory piece. The reasons the CCP published such an article at this time include the following. 1. To conceal economic difficulties and deceive the international community. China's economy is tangled in problems such as its real estate bubble and high unemployment, facing external challenges such as pressure from the US, the Russia-Ukraine conflict, and interruptions of global supply chain. In this situation, the CCP urgently needs to cover up its economic difficulties and maintain its international image. 2. To stabilize allies in the Belt and Road Initiative. Many developing countries have participated in China's Belt and Road Initiative. If China's economy falters, these countries will suffer as well. Therefore, China needs to boost morale in these countries by promoting the idea of Eastern ascendance, Western decline to keep them on its side. 3. To consolidate Xi Jinping's authority. Recently, Xi Jinping has faced pressure both domestically and internationally, with growing criticism challenging his authority. To consolidate his power, Xi Jinping needs to reiterate the rhetoric of Eastern ascendance, Western decline. This may also serve to rally support for the upcoming 2 political sessions or to divert attention from domestic conflicts. Liberal scholar Yuan Hongbing, currently residing in Australia, stated on February 27th that as long as Xi Jinping remains in power, the rhetoric of Eastern ascendance, Western decline will never become outdated. It will only be adjusted according to the specific needs of the CCP's external and internal propaganda. It doesn't matter how it sounds to those who hear it. The key is whether the leadership is satisfied. Therefore, there's no need to take it too seriously. The small number of propagandists in China who boast about Eastern ascendance, Western decline cannot change the fate and outcome of China's economic collapse. On February 25th, Xi Jinping chaired a financial meeting emphasizing the need to vigorously attract foreign investment. Why the sudden emphasis? Mainly because the current amount of foreign investment has dropped to the level of 1993. China's economy relies on constantly bringing in new money to fill the ever-expanding hole and pay off old debts, like a Ponzi scheme. Once new money stops coming in, the game collapses. Not only is new money no longer coming in, but existing money is flowing out. Coupled with successive Western sanctions, China's economy is teetering on the brink of collapse. In the past, Xi Jinping paid little attention to attracting investment. He was busy with military affairs, dealing with the United States, and geopolitical diplomacy. At that time, he was generous with spending, providing hundreds of billions of dollars in aid to African countries at a whim and only engaging with Putin diplomatically. Currently, Xi Jinping expresses concern regarding attracting investments and convenes meetings to deliberate on advancing waste utilization and upgrading outdated equipment. Such actions highlight underlying challenges within China's economy, politics, and resource management, potentially impeding their strategic objectives, including efforts to rival the United States. In 40 years of development, China has accumulated a considerable fortune. Initially, Xi Jinping believed that with this wealth, China could outlast the West and even bring down the US. However, now, not only has the West not collapsed, but China has discovered that it cannot afford to keep up. As other countries develop economically and technologically, China not only has not upgraded, but is experiencing widespread closures and collapses. In just 2 years, the CCP's 40-year fortune has run a deficit. It turns out that at least 80% of the trillions were illusory. The CCP's so-called strength is gradually being exposed. Xi Jinping appears to be increasingly concerned as he seeks to project strength in confronting the United States. However, the risk of his vulnerabilities being exposed prior to any confrontation undermines this desired image of strength. Consequently, the CCP is compelled to maintain a facade of confidence and readiness. The CCP's rhetoric emphasizing the resurgence of China and the decline of the US reflects their precarious position, suggesting a sense of desperation and vulnerability within the party's leadership. Despite growing public perceptions of the CCP's waning influence, the party persists in promoting optimistic economic outlooks, urging citizens to maintain confidence. This messaging suggests acknowledgement of internal challenges while attempting to boost morale by assuring a brighter future. However, the underlying reality remains grim. Recently, many companies in the Pearl River Delta, Yangtze River Delta, Beijing, and other places have collapsed one after another, and small businesses are struggling to survive. Housing prices are plummeting, but the monthly mortgage still needs to be paid. The stock market is also bleak. Investors watch helplessly as their wealth evaporates. Everyone is trying to pump themselves up, believing that tomorrow will be better. In the property market, when prices drop, everyone thinks about bottom fishing, but the prices continue to fall. The same goes for the stock market. When they think 3,000 points is the bottom, they borrow heavily to bottom fish, despite interest rates reaching up to 360% per year. Those who run shops have struggled for 3 years with no business, still hoping for a rebound, though there's no improvement in sight. It's the same for those who run factories. Foreign investment is no longer coming in, yet they still hope for a rebound. The more they wait, the more hopeless they become. China appears to be taking a significant risk with its future. This approach stems from the belief that a decisive victory over the United States would not only offset previous setbacks, but also yield substantial gains. This conviction is driving individuals at all levels within China to invest heavily in the pursuit of defeating the US. The outcome of this high-stakes gamble remains uncertain, and it remains to be seen whether China's strategy will ultimately prove successful or lead to overextension. On February 24th, the second anniversary of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, the United States, the European Union, and the United Kingdom imposed a new round of sanctions on Russia. The US alone imposed more than 500 sanctions, and the EU and UK followed suit with additional measures. They stated that these sanctions would be devastating. The US also warned that the losses to China, affected by these sanctions, would be much worse than those directly affected by the sanctions against Russia. Despite facing Western sanctions for 2 years, Russia appears undeterred, continuing its military engagements and development efforts seemingly without significant concern. The perceived boldness of Russia's actions prompts questions about the extent of support it receives from China behind the scenes. While it may appear that North Korea and Iran are providing assistance to Russia, there is skepticism regarding the transparency of these actions, considering the long-standing sanctions imposed on both countries. The apparent absence of Chinese involvement in these transactions raises doubts about the effectiveness of Western sanctions. The real estate industry in China has completely collapsed. The stock market has completely collapsed. Foreign trade has been continuously declining, as has foreign investment, and a large amount of resources have been drained in aiding Russia and Iran. At this point, targeting Russia will deal a heavier blow to China. The channels through which China secretly provided military components to Russia over the past 2 years have largely been exposed. This time, with Western economic sanctions, military deterrence, and psychological warfare all coming together, Xi Jinping's slogan might not be enough. The United States is clear about how much money China has made from supporting Russia, and there will likely be repercussions, such as freezing of assets. It's possible that Chinese nationals won't be able to open bank accounts in Western countries in the future, and further sanctions may be imposed on Chinese products. However, the US knows that China acts out when it's desperate, so even with these sanctions, the US has kept an ace up its sleeve. The US Navy Admiral said on February 18th that the US military is ready, and if China dares to make trouble, they will send troops to deal with it. As soon as China heard this, they wilted instantly. The US military is not something they can afford to provoke. Although China is now under sanctions, it is not going to collapse just yet. The CCP will try to cling on as long as possible. Scholar Yuan Hongbing said that totalitarian states, from the former Soviet Union, North Korea, to China, cannot achieve significant economic development. At first, they may experience rapid development due to advantages such as demographics or natural resources. However, authoritarian states lack innovation and vitality, and their economic development will eventually stagnate. China did experience tremendous economic development in the 1990s and 2000s, but this was not because the CCP was so capable. It was because Western countries pursued appeasement policies towards China. They kept giving money and technology to China, helping China develop its economy. However, Western countries have reversed course. This means that China has lost external assistance for economic development, and its prospects will only get worse. In summary, the current trend is a decline in China and a rise in the United States. Taiwanese professor Sun Guoxiang stated that although the United States has its fair share of problems, it operates under a market economy. However, the situation in mainland China is different, with issues existing in both the economic and political systems. Currently, the regime can only rely on propaganda to maintain control, lacking the ability to address deep-seated problems. With problems increasing, it may eventually lead to major issues with the regime. The failure of the CCP is inevitable, as is the success of the United States. Of course, it should be noted that the failure of the CCP does not mean the failure of the Chinese people, who may still hope for freedom and democracy. Xi Jinping says the Chinese economy must rise. However, currently, the Chinese economy is experiencing a slowdown in growth and soaring debt. Xi Jinping says Western countries are in decline. Despite various issues, Western countries remain strong. Therefore, based on the current situation, the East ascending and the West declining seems to be nothing more than a distant dream for Xi Jinping.